Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase and pricing and availability questions about this watch. Today we're discussing a 2019 launch made in 200 pieces in platinum from Lange Sohne of Glashütte, Germany. This is the Datograph Lumen, so continuing the Lumen series that features smoked sapphire and luminescence, both in liberal applications. This was also the 20th anniversary Datograph, marking 2 full decades since the seminal model debuted back at Basel in 1999. That was a transformative watch, and this is a tribute to that heritage. So the limited edition with a smoked sapphire dial, platinum case, dimensionally identical to the other Datograph up-down models. So 41 millimeters in diameter, 13.8 millimeters thickened from lug tip to lug tip, 48.6 millimeters, I should say, with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Throw it on the wrist. You can see 48.6 lug to lug is large but not huge. Now I'm pulling the strap down a little bit tighter than you would have it affixed, just so it stays on my wrist right here. So it's exaggerating its width a little bit. Over the top always exaggerates. The definitive angle is usually this one down the barrel, where you can see that the lugs are sort of inboard of the edge of my wrist. So you could wear this easily on a wrist my size or larger, so 16 centimeters circumference and up. And while it's not an ultra thin watch, you can see it is a well-sloped watch. With that domed bezel, it should slide under a cuff and be perfectly amenable to formal attire. The strap, as you can see, is large rectangular scale alligator leather, black with a gloss finish. We have a very lightly contrasting gray stitch, some bolstering or stuffing to give it volume, and then we have a large folded edge. It's not actually a cut edge, it's a folded edge. On the bottom calf skin, you can see this is an Lange Sohne factory strap in outstanding condition. And we've got a simple platinum pin buckle, which, like all Lange pin buckles, has 2 features I always shout out. First, you could see that it has an elevated bridge, so the strap sits flush inside the buckle rather than stacking up underneath, because it can sink in due to the fact that the bridge has been elevated. You also have a little retaining bar there, so if you use the smallest hole, or you even punch a smaller hole, if you've got a really small wrist, you know, sometimes a tightly strapped watch can get pinned on the pin, so that little retaining bar prevents the strap from sinking down all the way onto the pin. You also note something interesting. Usually these buckles are made by Brogioli. This one, FT, is made by FTOR. Lange does not make cases, clasps, or buckles, so you can always tell by the marks who made the buckle. This is FTOR, a Swiss company owned by Richemont, the parent of Lange. It's platinum, like the rest of the watch, but you can see there is a little Swiss St. Bernard hallmark. If you're wondering why the Swiss hallmark's on a German watch, that is why. You can see that Centror, a Swiss company associated with Audemars Piguet, made the case. And again, we've got the little St. Bernard head, a Swiss hallmark on a German watch. 200 pieces, individually numbered. You can see that it is a distinctively Lange shape, round with a sheer case flank and lugs that are stepped out from the profile. Back when Lange was refounded in 1990 by Walter Lange and Gunter Blumlein, among others, Blumlein, a famed German watch executive, thought that Lange needed something distinctive to set itself apart and create a new identity. Stepped lugs were a big part of his vision for how the watches would look. Not every Lange has a satin finished mid-case, but this one does, and so it breaks up the apparent thickness. You can also see that the case back is stepped inward, so when it's actually on the wrist, it looks quite a bit thinner than it actually is, and it sits lower. Being platinum, it is ultra white and ultra heavy. And then we have vintage-inspired rectangular chronograph pushers, which are both polished and satinated, and a Lange branded crown. Now, let's do a Lume Shot, because this watch is built for Lume Shots. As you could see, sub-registers, the panorama datum, or the outsized date, as well as the hands, including chronograph seconds, and the tachymeter scale. All of this making it one of the brightest Lange watches ever made. You can see even the counterweight to the chronoseconds has been loomed here. And there is a smoked sapphire dial, partly for aesthetics, but partly to allow the light to begin to activate the calendar discs before they come into position. So when you actually move them into position, they are already pre-charged, having received light through the dial. You can see the flyback chronograph operating in the dark. And the watch is a flyback chronograph, which means you can restart and reset without having to stop, reset, restart. So the point of a flyback is you can time two things that occur in very rapid succession because it is a time-saving mechanism. Pull out the crown. We do have hacking or stop seconds. All of the date changes are performed by rolling the hour hand through midnight or using the pusher adjuster. This watch includes a power reserve indicator down at the base of the dial. 60 hours of manual wind power reserve, a big step up from the original Dato, which was just 36. We have white gold alpha style hands, then white gold date frame, as well as hour indices. Gold, so they will not tarnish or oxidize with time. You can see elements of the mechanism through the dial, which is part of the appeal of the watch. And then you can see we have a base 1000 tachymeter scale outboard that can be used to gauge the speed of a fast object, such as a race car over a kilometer. Flip it all over. This is a descendant of the original Lange Datograph caliber, but in its 7th iteration caliber, L951.7. L meaning Lange, 95 meaning that's the year 1995 work started on the original version, 1 meaning it was the first movement they started that year, and 7 meaning it's the 7th iteration. 46 joules, beaten away at 18,000 vibrations per hour, one of the big changes from the original version, not just the power reserve, which is longer, but also the balance, which is now a free sprung design with little eccentric weights on the rim that are used to adjust the timing. It's a very shock-resistant system that won't change its timing under shock. It's also a very precise adjusting system. There's also an overcoil hairspring on that balance cock that allows the watch to keep consistent time in any physical position on the wrist, and it is 5-position adjusted, which is the high horology and chronometer standard. Lots of mirror finish here. You can see the screws, many of them are mirror finished on their top. So are many pieces of the chronograph works, including the tension spring and the anchor that helps to set the tension on the chronograph clutch. You can also see the column wheel and its anchoring screw are mirror finished. And you can see that the cap to the escape wheel and the swan's neck fine regulator have been mirror finished. We have German silver bridges and plates. Those are the ones that have the champagne color. The balance cock has been freehand engraved, and then the other bridges feature glasuta stripes. And we have blued screws that are fired in a kiln to achieve that oxidized blue. All the chronograph components are made of steel. They're beveled on their sides and then satinated on their tops. We have engine turning on the base plate. We have a sort of snailing on the bridge for the escapement below the balance. And then the blued screws and the polished screws, they serve different purposes. The polished ones are almost universally associated with adjustment of the chronograph or the time-telling mechanisms, whereas the blued screws are used to fix things in place. If you take a look at the edge of the bridges, you can see that they are also mirror beveled on their sides. And then we have golden chaton cups fixed in place using screws, a nod to the way pocket watches were made during the glory days of German watchmaking in glasuta during the 19th and early 20th century. That's why they're featured there. You can see the engraving on the balance cock is done by hand, freehand with a burin, no engines or lathes involved. And then we have instantaneous jumping minutes as well as the flyback capability. The column wheel feel on the Datograph is legendary, and this lives up to the legend. All of this 30 meters water resistant, so don't take it swimming, but otherwise it's an all-the-time type watch. And if you love this watch, reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.